Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Dennis. Now then, last week the government formally triggered a major overhaul of England's plan-making system, with Matthew Pennycook signing the regulations that bring the new local planning framework into force later this month. And at the same time, national policy voices have argued that newly elected council leaders should be given the flexibility to express formal views on local government reorganisation, giving them greater influence over how structural changes progress. But there is much more happening. So, Dennis, let's take a walk through some of our chosen topics this week from the Bulletin.
Yes, indeed. And we begin with a project concerning AI and court documents. A working group set up by the Civil Justice Council to examine the use of AI by legal representatives for preparing court documents has issued an interim report setting out its initial thinking and a consultation with a proposed way forward. The CJC agreed to set up the working group at its annual strategy meeting in January 2025, tasking it with addressing the question of whether rules are needed to govern the use of AI by legal representatives for the preparation of court documents, including pleadings, witness statements, and expert reports.
Well, in the interim report and consultation, I read that the working group says artificial intelligence does have enormous potential to be used for social good. And in the context of the justice system, it's already transformed the way in which the legal profession goes about its work, including in relation to research, data analysis, and the preparation of court documents. But it goes on to say, however, that these benefits do not come without significant risk.
And it notes the observation of Dame Victoria Sharp, President of the King's Bench Division in the case of Allende and the London Borough of Haringey, a 2025 decision, where she said, artificial intelligence is a tool that carries with it risks as well as opportunities. Its use must take place, therefore, with an appropriate degree of oversight and within a regulatory framework that ensures compliance with well-established professional and ethical standards if public confidence in the administration of justice is to be maintained.
Yeah, and the working group also says that in summary, the proposal that they make and on which they've invited consultation responses are that in specific circumstances and depending on what use of AI has been made, legal representatives involved in the preparation of court documents should be required to make a declaration relating to its use. And going on, they say, essentially, there are those in which AI has been used to generate evidence on which the court is being asked to rely. That is concerning. And other uses of AI, such as administrative uses for transcription, spell checking, assistance and the like, do not require a declaration.
And it adds, the capabilities of AI systems are changing rapidly. Legal practice is changing as a result of these new and powerful tools. This is and will remain a positive development as long as the interests of justice are kept firmly in view. And they also went on to say, the overall objective of these proposals is to maintain a balance, ensuring that the latest technology can be used to maximum advantage in the civil justice system in order to enhance access to justice by improving efficiency and reducing costs, while at the same time maintaining confidence in the rule of law. Now, the consultation closes on the 14th of April. Further information on the consultation, of course, can be found in Bulletin 9. Once the consultation has taken place, the CJC will, of course, produce a final report, and we'll give you more on that when it's produced.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll report back on that when it does. Now, excuse me. Now, let's turn to an update in law. This is the Gender Recognition Disclosure of Information England Order 2026. Now, it's quite niche, but I thought it was interesting. This is an important development for anyone in local government dealing with data governance, really, information sharing or interactions with NH Commission services. So to understand the 2026 order, we really need to start with the Gender Recognition Act 2004. Now, under Section 22 of that Act, It's normally a criminal offence to disclose protected information acquired in an official capacity. And protected information here includes details about a person's application for a gender recognition certificate, or if granted their gender prior to legal recognition.
The Act contains a small number of exceptions, and in Section 22, subsection 5, this allows the Secretary of State to create further exceptions by order. And one such exception was previously created in 2022, allowing certain disclosures to support a research project commissioned for the CAS review. The research project, known as the Data Linkage Study, was intended to examine the demographic characteristics, healthcare experiences, and intermediate outcomes for individuals referred as children to the former Gender Identity Development Service, or the GIDS, at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust.
Yeah, so although the CAS review concluded, and this was back in April 2024, and it published its final report there, the data linkage study itself, so the CAS review finished, but the data linkage study itself did not complete. And this did create a legal problem because the 2022 order defined authorised research as that carried out for the purposes of the CAS review. And now that the review ended in April 24, any continued research cannot now be said to fall within those purposes. So that left organisations who needed to share data at risk, very much at risk of committing a Section 22 offence, despite the government and NHS England being committed to completing the study and indeed expanding it as part of a wider research programme on children and young people's gender services.
The 2026 order resolves that problem by revoking the 2022 order and replacing it with an updated, carefully drafted exception. It allows protected information to be disclosed between authorised persons, but only where the disclosure is necessary for undertaking, assisting with, or facilitating the revived data linkage study. And the exception applies only if both the disclosing and receiving individuals are in England, and its application is limited strictly to the purposes of the study as now defined.
Yeah, so let's hope those purposes don't change. The order reflects several further changes as well. So responsibility for the study now lies with NHS England rather than as previously under the University of York. So the list of authorised persons has been updated to include the organisations now involved, including adult gender clinic providers, so not just children's. And the order also clarifies the definition of the data linkage study itself, ensuring it's clearly tied to the analysis of GIDS referrals for individuals who were under 18 at the time of referral and whose data is being linked with national and adult gender clinic datasets.
Now, this new order will be in effect for 3 years from the 20th of March 2026 to the 20th of March 2029, and this window allows sufficient time for the study to secure updated Health Research Authority approvals, transfer data, conduct analysis, and prepare outputs, without permanently extending the exception beyond what is necessary.
Yeah, so for local government lawyers, I think the key message is this. The Section 22 prohibition very much still applies, but a tightly confined, time-limited exception now exists. So something a little niche, as I said, but important nonetheless. Let's move on. We've all seen horrific pictures, I think, of fly tipping, Dennis, and indeed,
Yes.
unquote, pretty much all of us, we've driven by it or walked past it when we're out and about. What about the vehicles used to commit this blight on our communities now? What do we know?
Well, funny you should ask, because the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has issued guidance for local authorities now that for the first time advises them on how to seize and crush vehicles used to dump waste. DEFRA said the new guidance, which is entitled Vehicle Seizure Powers Local Authority Guidance, will provide the first comprehensive overview for councils, offering clear instructions on identifying, seizing and disposing of vehicles involved in fly tipping, as well as advice on taking cases to court and securing convictions against vehicle owners.
Yeah, well, the department added in relation to this that to strengthen deterrence, councils are expected to name and shame those involved on social media, whilst also sharing images and videos of their vehicles being crushed. And it adds the guidance offers suggestions for maximising engagement and awareness of council enforcement on social media, including repurposing seized vehicles for use to clean up other incidents of fly tipping.
And overt and covert surveillance techniques such as CCTV, drones, and automatic number plate recognition should be deployed to catch criminals, DEFRA said. The guidance also calls on local authorities to share intelligence with the police, the Environment Agency, and the national trading standards to build cases and run joint operations.
Dennis, I can't help thinking. I mean, I think it's great that it seems like some of the vehicles might be used to clear up other fly tipping.
Indeed,
Crushing,
yes.
I can see how it's a punishment, but to me, I would have thought being able to sell and take the proceeds and put that back into the enforcement might be another way of doing it. But
Yep. They may well be looking at that. I'm not sure how this will develop in practice, but clearly there are lots of options as a result of these proposals.
yeah, well, DEFRA Minister, that's Mary Krieg, would you pronounce it Krieg?
Yep.
Yeah, she said that, I'm going to quote her actually, we're empowering local authorities to clamp down on waste cowboys and restore pride in our local areas. I share the public's fury at seeing our streets, parks, and fields used as dumping grounds. Fly tippers should know if you use your van to trash our countryside, don't be surprised when it ends up on the scrap heap. It's not just the countryside, though, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, clearly the government is determined to put a squeeze on all of this. Now, the minister added, this government is investing in cutting-edge technology and boosting Environment Agency funding to put more waste crime officers on the ground while introducing tougher checks and penalties for those who break the law.
Well, according to data published last week, 139 vehicles were seized by enforcement officers from 41 councils in the year 24 to 25, and case studies of councils seizing vehicles as part of enforcement activity against fly tipping and organised waste crime have also been published.
And still on with the numbers, new statistics on fly tipping incidents across England show that local authorities carried out 572,000 enforcement actions in the year 2024-25, an increase of 8% from 530,000 in the previous year, 2023 to 24. Now, these actions included issuing fixed penalty notices, 69,000 of which were issued in the year 2024 to 25, and that's an increase of 9% from 63,000 in the year before that. Helen, the government are clearly determined to put a squeeze on fly tipping.
Well, let's skip over that last comment, Dennis. Did you see what I did there?
I did.
Skip. Yeah. You know, it's the listeners I feel sorry for, so let's move swiftly on.
Yes, there's a bit of a tipping point here, I think.
Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Well, let's move on to the Ethics and Integrity Commission because they've issued their first review. And on their website, which I would urge people to sort of dip into regularly, and there's links in the bulletin as always anyhow, they've published a letter to the Prime Minister marking the launch of its inaugural review. And this is a development that could have significant implications for accountability and oversight across the public sector, Dennis.
Yes, indeed. The EIC has chosen to begin its work with a deep examination of the public sector ombudsman system. Now, for many of us, ombudsman schemes are familiar terrain, formal mechanisms designed to investigate complaints, offer remedies, and ideally help public bodies learn from mistakes. But the EIC wants to look beyond individual disputes. It wants to understand whether our current ombudsman framework is genuinely capable of identifying systemic patterns, spotting emerging risks, and catalysing institution-wide improvements before problems become crises.
Well, the Commission has issued terms of reference and a call for evidence, inviting contributions from anyone with an interest in strengthening how ombudsman schemes support public accountability. So that's what we're all about. That absolutely includes local government lawyers. So we're often the people who see firsthand the friction points, I believe, as to how complaints arise, how investigations interact with internal governance, and where recurring issues signal something deeper than service level error.
Indeed, and EIC Chair Doug Chalmers put it quite plainly. The Commission wants to understand whether the powers that ombudsmen currently hold and the way they operate genuinely enable them to pick up themes and highlight developing problems in our institutions. The first review sits alongside the EIC's wider work on codes of conduct and the oversight mechanisms that keep public authorities aligned with the standards expected of them. And the intention is clear: raise standards, and in doing so, drive better outcomes for citizens.
Yeah, well, I think the timing of this review is important. I mean, in recent years, we've seen a proliferation of lengthy,
Mm,
expensive public inquiries. Many have uncovered major organisational failures that in some cases brewed for years. And
mm.
one of the questions the EIC is asking is whether a better resourced, better empowered ombudsman system could act earlier and more effectively to flag risks and help public bodies make meaningful improvements before matters escalate.
Indeed, and for local government, that's a particularly pressing question. Councils engage frequently with ombudsman investigations, often in areas where high volume complaints can reflect deeper pressures in social care, housing, education, and community services. If the EIC's review leads to a strengthened oversight role for ombudsmen, we may see shifts not just in process, but in expectations around organisational learning and the proactive identification of risk.
Well, over the coming months, this is definitely one to watch. If you or your authority have insights on how ombudsman schemes work in practice, their strengths, their gaps, the call for evidence may be an opportunity to shape the future of public sector accountability. And certainly, LLG will continue to maintain the strong links we have with the ombudsman to improve the sector. We do meet with them regularly. So we'll keep you updated as the review progresses.
Yes.
But every fortnight we issue out a specific bulletin for our Welsh colleagues. So let's take some news from Wales, Dennis.
Yes, this is interesting. The Environment Principles, Governance and Biodiversity Targets Wales Bill, which establishes a new and novel framework for environmental protection, has just passed through the Senate. The legislation will create the Office of Environmental Governance Wales, an independent body responsible for holding public authorities to account on environmental law. So, why is this important and why is this different?
Yeah, well, quite, because it includes scrutinising the Welsh Government, Natural Resource Wales, and local authorities. And the legislation also enables and requires ministers to set ambitious, legally binding targets to halt and reverse biodiversity decline by increasing native species, strengthening ecosystem resilience, and addressing the drivers of biodiversity loss.
Deputy First Minister with responsibility for climate change, Hugh Irranca-Davies, said, "This is a landmark moment for nature in Wales. By passing this bill, we have sent a clear message that protecting our natural environment is a national priority." And going on, he said, "As this winter has shown, climate change is driving more extreme weather events, putting pressure on our environment and biodiversity."
Yeah, so he added with 1 in 5 species at risk of extinction and communities across Wales already feeling the effects of more frequent floods, heat waves, and wildfires. The legislation, he said, gives us the tools we need to act decisively. And when the bill was introduced, a justice system impact identification published and anticipated that the office will make between 0 and 1 referrals a year to the High Court to address a Welsh public authority's failure to comply with a compliance notice issued by the oversight body.
The statement said such referrals are only intended to be made as a method of last resort once all other methods of enforcement have been explored, including informal resolution, information notices, and compliance notices. In addition to establishing the Office of Environmental Governance Wales, the bill is intended to ensure that Welsh ministers and Natural Resources Wales also apply environmental principles and integrate environmental protection when making policy. And it will also enable Welsh ministers to set ambitious biodiversity targets that drive actions towards halting and reversing the decline in biodiversity. Now, this seems a very progressive approach to diversity, Helen, and I don't think there is anything similar coming out of Westminster.
No, and I think we can always well, generally, we can always take a bit of a lead from Wales. Do you remember they implementing
Mm.
their not-for-profit
Not for
charitable
yes,
children's, yeah,
that occurred to
children's
me.
homes? Fascinating approach.
Mm.
So I always think it's good to look over to Wales, and I'll just give a little shout out to Gareth here. I was invited to the Welsh Monitoring Officers Group meeting
Uh-huh.
last week, and they're a fabulous group of individuals, and they always have good links with government and their LGA equivalent, and always a pleasure to attend their meetings. So let's move to our final item of the podcast, and announced by the government, I believe, on the 2nd of March. This is the news that some voters in the May local election be able to cast their ballots in shopping centres and on weekends as part of a plan to make voting easier.
For the first time since 1872, would you believe, the way voters cast their ballot in person is set to change. This May, 4 areas in England will take part in new flexible voting pilots designed to make voting easier, more convenient, and better aligned with modern lives. These pilots will test two major changes: voting in non-traditional locations and voting before polling day, including at weekends.
Do you know, Dennis, I was tempted to be very cheeky there and ask you what it was like voting back in 1872, but I
Oh,
decided
wicked,
against it. But
wicked.
I've now said it anyhow. I apologise profusely, Dennis. Um, let's look at some of these pilot areas. Let's start with Milton Keynes. So voters will in Milton Keynes, voters will be able to cast their ballot in the city's main shopping centre. Instead of being restricted to a single designated polling station, people are going to be able to vote in a central popular venue that fits naturally into their daily routines. This is what the government says. And if successful, this model could be expanded nationally, allowing ballots to be cast along traditional high streets and in town centre buildings.
I still feel hurt by your last comment,
Oh,
but being
Dennis.
professional, I'm going to press on with the stated script. So, voters in Cambridge, Tunbridge Wells, and North Hertfordshire will be able to vote ahead of polling day, including at weekends. For example, Cambridge residents will be able to drop into the Guildhall in the city centre at a time that suits them. The intention is simple but significant: to ensure voting is not limited to a single weekday, restricted by fixed hours that often clash with work or caring responsibilities.
Yeah, so according to the Minister for Democracy, that's a Samantha Dixon, the way we vote has not kept up with people's busy lives. I can see that, because having to try and trot
Mm.
off to some hall or church or it's a proactive effort, I would say. She describes these trials as the first meaningful change to in-person voting for over a century, an attempt to, quote, bring our democracy into the 21st century by giving voters more choice and flexibility.
Indeed, and the government is already considering further pilots, including mobile voting stations that could visit care homes, universities, and community centres, and even allowing voters to cast their ballot at any polling station within their local authority area. Throughout these pilots, the security and integrity of the voting system remain central. Participating councils will use existing safeguards and robust technology, while traditional polling stations and postal and proxy voting will continue unchanged.
Well, sector leaders have expressed strong support. Peter Stanion, good friend of LLG, he's the chief executive of the Association of Electoral Administrators. He praised the pilots as an important step toward offering voters greater choice, noting that weekend and early voting are already widely used in other democracies. And local returning officers from Tunbridge Wells, Milton Keynes, North Hertfordshire, and Cambridge echoed the enthusiasm, highlighting the potential to increase turnout, improve accessibility, and better reflect the realities of modern life.
These pilots sit alongside the government's Representation of the People Bill, which introduces broader reforms, including lowering the voting age to 16 and tightening rules on political donations. We'll keep watching as these pilots unfold and what they may mean for the future of local democracy.
Absolutely. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. I'm off to grovel to Dennis to get him to accept my apology. But in the meantime, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 9, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And for me too, although I leave you today slightly peeved.